All right, good afternoon, everyone. We want to go ahead and get started. My name is Mike Light, and I teach U.S. History here at Grand Rapids Community College. I'm also the department head for social sciences. And I want to thank you for attending this event. This lecture today is part of a series of lectures. It's a conference that we host every year. It's called the Race, Ethnicity, and Identity Conference. And just to give you some insight into some of the things that we've done, on Friday last week, a group of students and interested community members and faculty and staff took a tour of the Jim Crow Museum in Big Rapids, Michigan. We had a great keynote speaker on Monday night, Susan Reddick, who is a widow of the 9/11 attacks, and she founded an organization called Beyond the 11th, and that organization seeks to raise money to provide economic and educational opportunities for widows in Afghanistan, many of whom are widowed as a result of American military action. So great experiences, great talks. This should be another good one. I want to plug a couple of events that are coming up, if you'll bear with me for just a second, and then I'm going to introduce our speaker. Later on today in this room, as a matter of fact, right after this at 3 o'clock, Professor Susan Williams, who teaches European history here at GRCC, is going to present a talk called I Am a Woman's Rights, Color, Class, and Feminism in the Early 20th Century. And then we have a whole slate of events tomorrow, but it's capped off with our second keynote, which ends the conference week. And we have a special guest coming in. Her name is Kate Swanson. She's a geographer from San Diego State University. And she's going to be talking about gender, race, ethnicity, and childhood in the Andes, a geographical perspective. That's from 7 to 8:30 p.m. in the Calkins Science Center auditorium. So if you have some time tomorrow night, if you're looking for more extra credit opportunities, how many of you get extra credit for this? How many of you are just forced to be here? Nice! Hey, we don't mess around. We know how to fill a room, okay? I think you'll enjoy it anyway. All right, our speaker today, this afternoon, is Professor Heather Forrest. And Heather comes to us, where did I put my notes? Hold on a second. I apologize. Heather has been teaching at GRCC for 8 years. Seems a little longer than that. No, I'm just kidding, Heather. She teaches political science. She has graduate and undergraduate degrees from Western Michigan University. She conducted some PhD work at South Carolina as well, the University of South Carolina. Her focus is American political science and constitutional law, and she teaches all those courses for us here at GRCC. So I'd like you to give Heather a big round of applause. I'll let her get started, but I'm going to tell you there are a couple microphones, and I know it's a little bit intimidating, but we record all these so we can share them with the community and other students in the future. So if there's time for questions at the end, which I assume there's going to be, right?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. Or if you have questions at any point or comments, just raise your hand and wait for a microphone to come around and talk into the microphone. Pretend it's not even there. Okay. You all look great. You'll be fine on film. You'll be stars. Okay. All right, Heather.
Hi. There are a lot of people in this room. Today, I just want to talk a little bit about the Hispanic vote in the United States. I'm going to stand up here because there's a lot of people in the back for just a little bit. One of the first things I want to establish is terminology. It wasn't until the 1970s that the United States actually came up with the term Hispanic. And it's not about race, it's more about grouping, because we're really good at that, grouping all Spanish-speaking individuals into one lump cohort so that we can measure how it is that they vote and the behavior involved in that. So the Hispanic option didn't actually show up until the census on the 1980 census. So we don't have a whole lot of data before 1980, but I do want to stress that the term Hispanic and Latino, Latino is actually more favored in culture. Hispanic is American government created, so of course there's a little bit of, there's a lot of resentment toward that term. So while it says Hispanic population in the United States, I'm probably going to try and use the word Latino because it's viewed a little bit more favorably. Latinos comprise 16.3% of the population in the United States. That may not sound like a lot, but it's actually more than African Americans. And the projection for that population is substantial. Hispanic or Latino, the term actually includes Mexicans. Of the 16.3% of the US population, 63% of that are Mexican. So people who are from Mexico. California, Texas, New Mexico comprise well over half of this population. So a substantial amount of individuals of Mexican descent actually reside in California, Texas, and New Mexico. Cubans also are considered Hispanic or Latino, primarily in Florida. Cubans, only 3.5% of the Hispanic or Latino population, but they vote very, very differently than their Mexican counterparts. Puerto Ricans, 9.2% of the Hispanic population primarily reside in New York and New Jersey. I promise this will not all be numbers throughout here. I just want to first establish that the term Hispanic is generally used by the American government, but what it actually means. The Dominican Republic, 2.8%. So as you can see, for the most part in this presentation, we'll be looking at the Mexican, Cuban, and Puerto Rican in terms of ideology, especially because the Cuban population is very different in terms of how they vote. Central America, not including Mexicans, and South American, 5.5. So from this slide, I want you to understand that when we say Hispanic, we're including a whole lot of people that may not think and believe the same thing. So we have to make general assumptions about this group of people because that's what Americans do, and in order to determine voting behavior and voting patterns. So other Spanish cultures, about 7%. Now, in terms of the distribution of that 16.3%, so out of the US population of what, we're at like 312, 311 million people, 16% of that is Hispanic. The top 3 states that have the most population are New Mexico, Texas, and California. And again, as it said on the last slide, primarily those are of Mexican descent. The largest increase in the Latino population has actually not been in those states, even though in both the 2010 and the 2000 census, Texas gained 4 US House seats in each election, or in each census. Huge numbers, huge numbers. Accounting, obviously, for immigration. But you see a lot of these states that they're moving to, this growth is in percentage, 148% increase in South Carolina alone. And strangely enough, if you look at the Michigan census, you'll find a substantial amount of our increase in population, even though our population decreased between 2000 and 2010, and I think we all know why. A substantial amount of the increase has been attributed to the Hispanic population. So what's interesting to see is that we are not actually seeing this segment of society stay primarily in those 3-4 states. California, Texas, and New Mexico still have the largest immigrant population. Now, this is projection. So the US population by race and ethnicity, I'm not sure if you can really see this. In 2000, it was 12.5. In 2010, it's 16.3. That's a substantial amount of growth in just 10 years. That's a lot. But it's actually lower than previous decades. In 1970, we went from 4.6 to 1980, 6.4. There's a substantial jump between 1980 and 1990, but look between 1990 and 2000. And that's a huge increase in immigrant population. So you have to wonder what in the United States is drawing this population. Well, jobs. Between 2000 and 2010, Still a sizable increase, but smaller. Projection, the census, the Pew Research and the US Census projects between 2010 and 2020, if this trend continues, there's not going to be a huge increase in the Hispanic population. I don't know that I so much agree, because during 2000 and 2010, the recession hit this population especially hard, and the jobs market is actually improving right now, and they are seeing a substantial amount of growth in the job area. So I suspect between 2010 and on through that these numbers are actually going to be higher. So 2020, 2030, 2040, by 2050 we're going to be up close to 30%. So what does that actually mean for voting? Well, Latinos do vote. They are faced with more eligibility issues in terms of the ability to vote because of language barriers. Recently, you've seen states passing laws requiring photo identification. Michigan has that now, but both Texas and South Carolina's voter identification law were just in the past couple of weeks struck down by the Department of Justice, because they haven't sufficiently proven that the laws are not directly impacting this population, and it seems to be that the way that those laws are written are targeting this population and hindering their voter turnout. So it still poses some problems. They are better represented at the state and local level. For those of students who've been in my American government class, you see that state and local government politics is very different than national politics. And the community, the state and local government tends to respond to the local community a lot better. And so you tend to see more representation at that level of this cohort, of this voting bloc. They don't differ much from non-Latino voters in terms of the issues that they find important. And most people find that a little surprising. Most people assume, well, immigration is the most important thing to this voting population. It's not actually true. Education is. Education is the most important issue to Latinos. 9 out of 10 Latinos believe very strongly that a college education is very, very important. That's much higher than their non-white counterparts. That's high. And you're actually seeing the college enrollment for this group for Latinos actually increasing substantially too in the last couple of years. They find education very important. Jobs in the economy are actually next on their list in terms of importance. We're talking, out of the survey they were asked, do you find this very important, somewhat important, and important? And 50 to 60% of the people found that these top two things were the most important issues to them. So, of course, everybody finds jobs in the economy to be important, but healthcare is actually next on their list. It's not immigration. They have just as much difficulty accessing healthcare as normal non-Hispanic Americans. And while they're increasing their numbers in the United States by having natural-born citizens here, they're still facing the same obstacles that ordinary Americans are as well. They also find that the federal deficit is especially difficult, and they're concerned about it, especially when it comes to terrorism and the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. It's unfortunate that a lot of assumptions are made about this this voting bloc, about Latinos, and these assumptions are wrong about how they are and how they participate, and that they themselves are here for a free ride, and that's just not the case. They're very concerned about our culture, and because it is their culture as well. But actually, further down on the list is immigration. Now, they do find immigration important, obviously. But even within the Latino community, there are differences of opinions on immigration. there are those Latinos who are very much troubled by the rate of illegal immigration in the United States. There are a lot of people who are troubled by that. Not all Latinos are all about just allowing everybody in here to gain citizenship. The policies that are being passed by the Obama administration are especially problematic for some of the Latinos. You've actually seen more deportation of Mexican Latinos during the Obama administration than you did during the Bush administration. However, what of course they're not telling you is that Obama is actually counting them now. So what was caught at the border as an illegal immigrant were just turned around and brought back. If they're caught at the border or outside the border, they're counted as deported and sent back. So it's a difference in a numbers game. And so those numbers are being reported, and Latinos are, especially those people who are well aware of this deportation issue, and keep in mind the people who are being deported are committing crimes. They are the ones that are most troubled by this deportation policy, but you're seeing a substantial increase in the number of deportations. And again, it's because we're actually counting them now, so that makes a little bit of a difference. The environment. I think you're seeing by now that you can see that Latinos and the Hispanic population has a lot of similarity than non-Hispanics. Well, they live here too. They value what we value. For the most part, the family structure is different in terms of they do have larger families. A lot of that plays a role in their religion, but they're just as committed to this country as non-Hispanics are. And I think it's posing a problem that we're trying to make them not be as committed. Latinos, especially Mexican, tend to be Roman Catholic. And so Roman Catholic generally in the United States translates into Republican, right? Because you'd be against same-sex marriage and you'd be opposed to abortion and opposed to a lot of those other social conservative issues. But it's not really the case for Latinos. The Roman Catholic religion for Latinos is actually much more progressive than it is for their American counterparts. Latinos, you'll actually find, are a little bit more supportive. Even the Roman Catholic Latinos are a little bit more supportive by a few percentage points than non-Hispanics of same-sex marriage and for birth control and abortion and the ability to choose. So what we would normally like to say, well, if they're Roman Catholic, then they're absolutely going to be conservative because they have to be opposed to this and they have to be opposed to that. Well, those are nice assumptions to make, and the Republican Party likes to make those, but it doesn't translate into votes for the Republican Party. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Beyond Roman Catholic, the second most prevalent religion in the Hispanic community and the Latino community is Protestant. And again, that would be something that one would consider to be more conservative, more Republican, but that's not what it translates into in a vote for those who are Hispanic. Again, as I said, more progressive on gay marriage. And this kind of just goes along with their belief structure that they're a little bit more progressive in their frame of thinking in this way. Now, in terms of party affiliation, Latinos tend to be, for the most part, in general, again, I'm going to make generalizations, Latinos tend to be more Democratic, 2 to 1. But it's complicated. It's more than that. It also depends on who's the Democrat and who's the Republican running for office. We can't discount the fact that Texas governors tend to win a large number of Latino votes, all right? and that Rick Perry and George Bush have a huge support from their Mexican base. And why is that? Because they have more progressive, more democratic views on immigration than their Republican Party does. 2-to-1 advantage. Of those registered, self-identification, 45% Democrats, only 20% Republican. So again, if you're thinking, well, they're Catholic, they're Roman Catholic, they're Protestant, they believe this on abortion and this on same-sex marriages and this on stem cell research or whatever, you still can't make the assumption that religion translates into a conservative vote. It's just not how it works with this cohort. Again, breakdown of the Latinos. Why isn't this advancing? Mexican, as I said before, Texas, Arizona, and California. Yes, this is a repeat. It's been up here before. But what I want to show you is in this area of the United States, you'll see over half of them are Democrats. And yet, Texas governors running for president are very successful in this voting cohort. Why? More progressive on immigration. They may be socially conservative, but when it comes to immigration, which is a very important issue to them, they're much more moderate on it. I mean, just think about Rick Perry. Rick Perry running for president along with a number of other people this year, got out of the race kind of early. But one of the things that led to his downfall is one of the very things that could have drawn the Latino vote to the Republican Party. And that's the fact that he actually passed legislation in Texas that allowed undocumented workers or undocumented individuals to register and pay in-state tuition at colleges and universities. And if you recall, what's the most important thing to Latinos? Education. And if you stop and think about it, education is very, very important for any state, right? We take education in Michigan very, very seriously. Our colleges and universities very focused on it. You come out of high school, you come out of, you're going right into college. College is very important. Well, what do we also know about college-educated individuals? They commit less crime. And so it benefits the state to educate its people. Educated people commit less crime. So why would Rick Perry actually pass legislation to allow undocumented individuals to pay in-state tuition? He gets a better educated community, right? So it's unfortunate that that approach and that policy is actually what probably lost him the GOP ticket. And it's unfortunate because Latinos aren't as big of fans of Obama as they were or are of Hillary Clinton. And we'll get back to that later. But for the most part, Rick Perry probably could have given Barack Obama a pretty good run for his money in this next election, at least when it came to Latino voters. He really, really could have. But the GOP apparently didn't recognize that. So, Cubans. Cuban Americans, again, only 6% of that 50.5 million people in the United States described as Hispanic on the census. Only 6% of them are Cubans. But keep in mind, Cubans are very conservative. Very conservative. I mean, this is self-identifying, and they're primarily located in Florida. So I find it interesting in the last, in this last primary election when Florida all of a sudden goes to Mitt Romney, and Mitt Romney wins so many of these conservative or of these Latino votes in the South, and they're thinking, well, maybe Latino voters will turn out and vote for Romney. In a general election, no. The people who turned out to vote in the Republican primary were Republicans. And they voted for Romney because they're Republican. It really had nothing to do with his religion or anything like that. I mean, it has to do with their conservative beliefs. Now, in terms of Puerto Rican population, three largest here, New York and New Jersey, as I've mentioned before, 15% of the 50 million are Hispanic and Latino from Puerto Rico, 51% Democratic. 51%. Now, is that a product of where they live or where they've come from? Well, you just have to look. Again, only 17% are self-identifying as Republican. So what does this mean? It means that when you group all of these individuals together, you're going to have some error in there, right? So while Cubans only make up 6% of that, they're very conservative thrown into that block. And so, again, it depends on who's running for office. Jeb Bush, President George Bush's oldest brother, was governor of the state of Florida in the 2000 election. And I know you all remember the 2000 election. It was so memorable. Bush v. Gore in 2000. Jeb Bush was governor of the state of Florida, had a lot of support from Floridians, and actually helped his brother's campaign and his father's campaign when it came to garnering the Latino support and the Latino vote. I want you to also keep in mind, I don't think we've seen the last Bush run for office. I do believe very strongly that Jeb Bush will run for office. He just can't yet because we still remember, bless his heart, his brother. So we need to let that, to let the memories of, I mean, George Bush left office with one of the lowest approval ratings. Now, history may treat him very differently, but of course, public opinion right now is not very favorable. It doesn't necessarily mean that Jeb Bush is the same as his brother. In fact, they're very, very, very different in many, many ways. So I actually think Jeb Bush will run. And I think that he's going to give any opponent, anyone on the Democratic ticket, a run for their money when it comes to garnering the Hispanic vote. Again, why? He's from Texas. 2, he's bilingual. 3, he's married to a Latina. He has biracial children. And for many, many, many years, he's been telling the GOP to dial down their negative rhetoric on immigration, because this is the largest minority group in the United States, and it is growing. I mean, you saw that. By 2050, you're going to be mid-20s in terms of population of the United States. You can't discredit this population. You can't discredit these voters. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Some of the issues for 2012. Again, as I hinted at a little bit before, the number of deportations from year to year, you saw between 2008, 2009, and 2010, you saw these numbers go up substantially during the Obama administration, especially considering how many deportations were during the Bush administration, relatively low. But it's all in how you count those deportations as well. But of course, that's not what they report in the news. They only report that Obama is deporting more Mexicans or more Hispanics than even their proportion of population to the United States, which means of all those being deported, there are more people of Hispanic origin, specifically Mexicans, that are being deported, even more than what their proportion is to the United States, which that's high. Removals are compulsory and confirmed movement in the of an inadmissible or deportable alien out of the United States based on an order of removal. So again, these are actually being counted and recorded differently. One more note on that. Another reason why Texas governors tend to garner so much support from immigrants is because when you look at the national returns on the House of Representatives, you actually see Texas is very red, right? We know that Texas is very, very conservative. But if you check out those districts and those areas along the border, they're very blue, which means Texas has to take into consideration, and their representatives have to take into consideration, their Hispanic population. If they don't, they're losing a substantial amount of voters. Dropout rates. It's a huge problem for the Hispanic community. Hispanic population in the Hispanic community has the highest dropout rate of any other cohort. 17.5. I think our dropout rate in the Grand Rapids area is between 40 and 50% of the Hispanic high school students. That's high. That's really high. And what do we know about education? It decreases crime, right? So this is an area that needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed. Yet what are some of the obstacles that group, that the Latinos face in American schools? Anyone? What? Language, right? And of course, it's up to the state and local government and the local school boards to determine whether or not they offer bilingual classrooms, bilingual anything. It's up to the state and local government to determine whether or not we want to have our ballots printed in different languages. It's up to each state and local community. So of course, Texas and Florida and California are going to have bilingual ballots, but why don't other states? Because if they do, then they increase the voter turnout of a segment of society that doesn't tend to favor the Republican Party. So why would the Republicans be opposed to having ballots printed in several different languages? Because it would encourage those people who don't traditionally vote for them to go out and vote. Blacks have a high rate as well, but in proportion to their portion of the population, Hispanic really has the biggest problem. But again, as I was preparing for this, I have found that recent trends in the last 2 years, the census was reporting, the Pew Hispanic Research website, I got a lot of this information from. They especially have been focusing on the increased college education of the Hispanic and Latino community, and they're making huge strides. But still, with the high dropout rate at the high school level, you can't go to college if you don't have a high school degree, and they actually have one of the lowest GED rates of high school dropouts of any other cohort as well. So it's problematic, and it is an area that needs to be faced. In terms of representation, again, I repeat, I know, 16.3% of the US population, that's their share, about 50 million in the United States. 6% of the 435 members of the House are Latinos. 6%. Yet, there's 50 million Latinos in the United States. It's a really small number. 2%. We have 2 in the Senate. 2. That's problematic on many levels, because if you want to get anything done in Washington, what do you need? Numbers. You need people on the inside who understand the issues facing this community. And if they're not in office, are the people in office going to always respond? Well, no. But it also begs the question, do you have to have somebody who looks like you in order to accurately represent you? And, well, I could spend a couple hours on that question alone. There's a lot of information in the political science arena in terms of representation. And the argument can be made both ways. You don't necessarily have to have somebody who looks like you to accurately represent you in Congress. But it begs the question that Congress's approval rating right now is about 10%. I love that the president's approval rating is always in the news, 40, mid-40s, something like that. And oh, it dropped below 50 and we ought to be concerned. No, you should be concerned with the segment of government, the institution of government that you actually elect, and that would be Congress, all 435 members of the House, and all 100 senators, you vote for. The community, the United States, people vote for directly. Do we choose our president? The Electoral College does. Don't even get me started on the Electoral College. So in state elections, you actually saw in the last, I just want to show you how state elections look very, very different. New Mexico, their last governor was Bill Richardson, a Latino. The first time in history, New Mexico elected a Latina, and she's a Republican Latina. That's significant. Because if you stop and think about where do most of our candidates who run for president come from? State governorships. This is huge progress. It is. But keep in mind, that's at the state and local level. And if we can't overcome the immigration challenges within the GOP party, do you think the GOP party is going to want a Latino or a Latina running as a candidate? It'd be nice, but Nevada, Republican, and I'm sure some of you may have heard of Mark Rubio, who was elected senator. Oddly enough, a large proportion of the Latino population in Florida don't know who he is. And his name has been circulated a lot in terms of a potential vice presidential running mate for Newt, Mitt, Santorum, whoever's going to win it, in order to pull in the Latino vote. Well, there's problems there. So at the state and local elections, again, you have much more representation. That's because we have more control over how those, and they're much more closer to the people, much more accountable to the people. Now, midterms. Now, I'm just going to glaze over this because I'm sure your eyes are starting to glaze over with all these graphs, and I got that. So in terms of voter turnout rates, so here's the big question. There's 16.3% of the US population, 50 million people. But we tend to make this assumption, we meaning not so well-informed people in the United States, make this assumption that they can't vote because they're all illegal. It's not the case. And of eligible voters in the United States, the Hispanic community does turn out to vote. More in midterm elections, which many people don't even, who are non-Hispanic, there are a lot of Americans who don't know that we actually vote for our representatives every 2 years. President goes up for re-election every 4, but we elect Congress every 2 years. You know, the one that has the 10% approval rating, every 2 years. So that's coming up again this November as well. And you find that in midterm elections, Hispanics turn out to vote a substantial amount. But in the 2010 election, it went down. And this can be attributed to a number of things. One, what happened between 2006 and 2010? Anyone? You can speak. I'll allow it. Recession. Right? And along with the recession, you see a high number of foreclosures on homes, and you see a lot of people losing jobs. The Hispanic community was the hardest hit of any cohort. And so between 2006 and 2010, you saw a lot of these families moving to where jobs were. And each state has its own laws about registration. In Michigan, you have to register to vote 60 days prior to a general election. In Wisconsin, you can register to vote the same day that you go vote. So because there are different rules on that, it makes it especially difficult for them, for all Americans, but specifically when all these big changes are going on. You see some challenges when it turns out to vote. Voter turnout rates among Latino eligible voters. Once again, college graduates. Not only are they educated, but they turn out to vote. Educated people tend to vote more. That's all there is to it. So why do the Latinos think education is so important? Not only do you make more money, you have a more substantial impact on society, but your voice is heard more. So Cuban, of course, remember they're the 6% of this whole thing. They vote, which is why Florida is still a toss-up state. Other Spanish origins and so on and so forth. I don't want to spend too much time on that. But now this is for the presidential year, because again, we have an election every 2 years, but a president every 4. So in 1998, 1992, 1996, and 2000, you actually see the Latino vote increase in 1992. Anybody remember who was elected in 1992? Bill Clinton. Did anybody know who he ran against? George Bush Sr., which was a little bizarre that the Latinos vote actually left and actually supported Bill Clinton. For some reason that I have yet to find specific concrete evidence for, Latinos love the Clintons. They love the Clintons. They supported Hillary 3-1 over Barack Obama. And the lead that she had in these primary states where Latinos resided is astounding, which just makes for really good future elections, in my opinion. So in 1996, again, Clinton garnered the Hispanic vote. In 2000, who ran? George Bush against Al Gore. Gore didn't even ride the wave of Bill Clinton's huge support from the Latino vote. They supported George Bush in both 2000 and in 2004. And in 2008, they really wanted Hillary Clinton. And she held on as long as she could, but eventually Barack Obama did get the bid, and they eventually did throw their hat in the ring with Barack Obama, because for some reason, John McCain and the whole Arizona immigration law thing just kind of didn't feel right. So they weren't going to support John McCain for obvious reasons. But the change in turnout rates, you can actually see from 2004 to 2008, it had gone down for whites and blacks, actually increased for blacks, but Hispanic, it's still increasing. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what do we expect to come. On the left, you'll find the state, and in 2008, actually I believe should be 2010, there's a new governor elected. And it's interesting, I want you to keep note that in the 2010 midterm election, there were 10 states that switched from a Democrat to a Republican governor. A Democrat to a Republican governor. Again, where do we generally get our candidates to run for office? Governorships or senators. And so the GOP has actually set itself up for some really good candidates for future elections if they do well at the state level. Texas, Rick Perry. In 1996, Texas actually went for Bob Dole. Yeah, he actually did run for president at one point. In 2000, obviously Texas went for Bush in 2000 and 2004. That's his home state. For McCain in 2008. In 2012, I'm going to go ahead and say it's probably going to be the Republican. Why? Because I just can't imagine seeing Texas go blue on any map, other than just looking at the House seats. In Arizona, Miss Brewer, female Republican, new, and Clinton won Arizona in 1996, Bush, and obviously McCain in 2008 because that's where he's from, and he's going to take his own. Florida, Mr. Scott, by 1%, he won that seat. by 1%. It was so close. Clinton won Florida in 1996, Bush in 2000, again in 2004, and Obama took Florida in 2008. Now, yes, again, a large percentage of Latinos probably turned out to vote for Romney, but of course they turned out to vote in the Republican primary election, and they're Cubans, and they're already Republican. But if you look at the general population of Floridians who are Hispanic or Latino, they're probably not going to go for Mitt Romney. Although Mitt Romney probably could endear himself to that community if he just tried, but by doing so, he hurts his own base, which is the Republican Party. California, Mr. Brown is back in office. He actually, this is a switch from a Republican. Arnie was governor of California. He had actually been governor of California 20-some years ago, something like that, and before there were term limits. And so now he can run again, and he's actually doing obviously a pretty good job over there. Bill Clinton won in 1996, Al Gore in 2000, Kerry and Obama. Something about California, it's been a long time since we've seen a Republican win California. Illinois. Now, why am I showing you these states? Because these are the states that have the highest rate of immigrants: Texas, California, Florida, and Illinois. So what do we need to look for in the next election in terms of those states that need to go red or blue for an individual to win? Quinn in Illinois, Clinton, Gore, Kerry, Obama. Obama's going to win Illinois again. Why? It's his home state, right? California. I do believe that Obama is going to win California as well. Why? Because I just can't see Mitt Romney garnering the support from California. Arizona, I mean, they went for Clinton, but I don't see them going for Obama. Texas, it's going to go Republican. The one that I still I don't know about is Florida. And sometimes I want to say it's a little bit of a toss-up, but if anybody has an edge, I would say it's Obama. But again, as we've seen in this primary election, anything can happen. And so just waiting for the next tidal wave of interesting things to unfold. So my last projection is actually 2016, which may, okay, well, Joe Biden may actually run for office to succeed Barack Obama, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. I think it's going to be Hillary Clinton. I think she's going to step down as Secretary of State here in the next couple years to take a break in order to run for president. And if Hillary Clinton goes in, I really think that we're either going to see Jeb Bush in 2016 or in 2020. He can't wait too much longer. He's getting a little old. But so is she. So, 2016, 2020, I really think, I'm really praying that those two are going to head off and face off, because that is going to be a fascinating presidential, at least for me. It'd be fascinating to see what this cohort and what this population does with a more moderate Republican when it comes to, Jeb Bush, he's the epitome of the GOP bringing in that vote. So, and lastly, I want to make no bones about it. We are not born recognizing people for the color of their skin and their gender. And you've probably seen this circulating on Facebook. That's where I got it. And I love this picture. I think it's what this conference we're trying to do. I think by trying to recognize that race, ethnicity, and identity is part of this culture, it defines us in very different ways. And it's a learned behavior. We're not born with it. We're taught it. And I think that's unfortunate, because all babies are stinking cute, And I I guess that's what I want you to take away from it, is we may be grouping these individuals together in order to study their voting behavior. Yes, I readily admit that. But there you go. That's all I got. I'm going to stop. Questions? Uh-oh.
Wait, please wait for a microphone. We'll bring it back.
Mike, give me water. Is the mic on?
Professor Forrest, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Last election, we lost some of our electorate votes here in Michigan
Yes.
to
One.
Florida. Are we going to lose any more come next election because of the Latino influence in our election?
The last census, we lost between 2020 and or 2000 and 2010. We actually lost population as a whole in Michigan. Even though the population in the United States increased, the proportion of population in Michigan decreased. Take your pick as to why. But we have actually, in the last 3 or 4 decades, 3 or 4 censi, we've lost a seat. Now, do I think that that will continue? It kind of depends how we pull out of the recession and where our jobs come from. If we are able to create more businesses in Michigan that can employ more people rather than just depending on the big 3, probably we'll see more people prosper here. And I gotta say, we're losing our college-educated students at an unbelievable rate. I mean, if you just take a look at the number of rentals of U-Hauls around graduation time going away, and I mean, if we can find them jobs, people want to stay here. It's beautiful here. So I project if we lose any more, it'll be just 1. But Texas will probably gain another 4 again. So.
Hi, Heather. Sorry.
Scared the dickens out of me.
Strong Croatian voice. Thank you for your talk. I really find the information interesting. I was wondering, what's you at the beginning of your talk you said that one of the most important issues for Latino voters for education, but at the same time, then you show the information that Latino students are the ones who are most likely to drop out of high school. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there is at least on the surface, there is apparent contradiction here. If it's important, why would they drop out of high school? But let me just think this through just a little bit, and then I ask you what you think about it. But I think perhaps the hypothesis could be that well, this is because why it's important, because many Latinos drop out of school. Therefore, I want to solve the problem, and that's why it's important for me as a Latino voter. Is that something that you researched more deeply, or?
I did notice that, yes, education is very important, and yet they have a higher dropout rate. But again, I think that there are many different reasons for the dropout rate, and it's not necessarily just one single thing. It's probably language barriers, it's culture, it's it may be the mobility. If the families are moving, because they tend to move more. If the families are moving a lot, then there's not a whole lot of incentive to become attached to a community. And I think attaching to the community and making friends actually encourages individuals to probably stay in high school more. I'm making some leaps here. because I don't really have exact numbers on that. But education is still very, very important. Yeah. I forgot to show this map. This is the population growth of the Hispanic community. I find it kind of interesting. So this is 1980, 1990, 2000, and 2010. And I think it's just interesting to know where the population has increased. And we often talk about California, Texas, and Florida, but look at these inner areas that are also increasing substantially in Hispanic population, which just means that they're not staying in one particular location. Go ahead, question.
That kind of reflects my question.
Oh.
In this election, I think the last few elections, the level of rhetoric, especially on the GOP, toward this population has been, I would at least say, increasingly hostile. Given the fact that everybody knows this population is increasing and will have a bigger influence on elections, why do you think the GOP is going that direction, given that you would think their leadership would be wanting to more embrace this population, given that the demographics are only going to increase? But it seems as if, to me, a lot of the leadership has been more hostile, at least rhetorically, especially in the legislation too. Like in Arizona, the law that was passed was very controversial, but the right kind of embraced that and all kind of stood behind that. So why would they go that route, given that on the long term, it seems like it's going to work against them?
Excellent question, and if I had the answer for that, I think I could be a very rich individual. But what I think it really comes down to is the GOP is still a little bit in denial about how much influence the Latinos have, and ways in which to barriers to keep that segment from voting. Of course, the voter identification laws and so forth, and even the DREAM Act that was put up. There was widespread support from both moderate Republicans and hugely from Democrats for that. It was so disappointing that was shot down. Now, the DREAM Act was that policy that was passed if you went through 2 years of college or served in the military for 2 years, that you were fast-tracked towards citizenship. It was defeated, and very disappointing in that it really would have bridged a gap. But all those people who are actually running for office, Mitt Romney, Santorum, and Kane all said that they would have voted against it. And Newt Gingrich said he would have supported it if they would have mandated a 2-year service in the military. Well, okay, but that's not. Why are the GOP so hostile? I don't know. I really don't know. And I think that's why governors and candidates coming out of Texas have the best shot at getting the GOP back the presidential office, back the White House. But for some reason, I'm baffled. I'm continually baffled as to why the GOP is ostracizing such an important population.
Professor Forrest, might there be a socioeconomic issue rather than just numbers? Is that possible?
Well, then why would those individuals from Texas still be garnering the support from that population if?
Well, if you look at national,
Right.
I have no idea what the answer is. I'm just trying to think through
either.
it. But I'm just curious if that, for example, 62% of the Latino voters in the country are Mexican. Those folks tend to have lower incomes, less political power in terms of being able to support a national campaign economically. It may translate into less desire to cater to that group, even if they have votes.
But money doesn't always get behind movements. I mean, look at the civil rights movement. People in the civil rights movement, the freedom rides, the sit-ins, and I mean, you very well know that they didn't have money either, and so it was their movement, it was their passion, it was the stand, it was the policy that moved people, and I really think that's what the DREAM Act did. I think that there was so much moderate support for that the GOP really shot themselves in the foot. And I want to say one more thing. Jeb Bush has actually given many speeches over the last few years to Republicans saying, get it together and dial down your negative rhetoric toward immigrants and immigration because you're hurting yourself. And he has been trying and trying and trying. It's amazing how much progress he's made, but as soon as he takes a step forward, it seems like the GOP does something and they take 3 steps back. You know, so you're fighting this staunch ideology. My apologies. Yeah, guys, but you're chatting. Yeah, he's coming.
You showed us a lot of national statistics. Is there anything specifically for Michigan that differs from the national numbers that you showed?
Michigan has seen an increase in immigrant population. Actually, over half of even though our population decreased in comparison to the rest of the country, our increase in population in Michigan is largely attributed to, almost half is attributed to the Hispanic population. We've seen a large number of the population in the Detroit and the greater Detroit area leave, but over on this side of the state, you've seen a huge rise in that, and that could be for a number of different reasons. Maybe it was good farming here in the last 10 years. Maybe we've been more receptive in terms of policies, policies that have more difficulty and challenges for immigrants obviously make them go away, like the Arizona immigration law that allows police officers to just pull them over and ask for documentation. We don't have those kind of policies here. And so that's, I think, why you're seeing, again, if you're looking right here, you're seeing, yes, since 1980, we have seen a substantial increase, especially Illinois in Chicago and the greater Chicago area has seen an increase. So it has to do with policy. I mean, people are going to migrate where they're received. So, any other questions?
Well, if there aren't any other questions, then let's give Professor Forrest another round of applause.